So what markets is Bitcoin disrupt? It's disrupting store of value assets, value itself. That's where it's competing. So the bond market, the real estate market, equities, right? Stocks, cash, offshore bank accounts, right? Those types of assets. We think it's realistic to capture 5% of those store of value assets. That would push the price of Bitcoin up to 45 trillion. Divided by the 21 million Bitcoin that there are, brings it to about a $2 or $3 million per Bitcoin price. So we're already seeing that 5% number floating. We're already seeing people move to it. And I think 5% is very realistic, maybe within the next decade for sure. And that puts it at a price of $2 to $3 million per Bitcoin.
In just a few years, Bitcoin could soar to $3 million per coin as it snatches 5% of the world's store of value assets. That's the latest message out from seasoned entrepreneur and investor Mark Moss, who has built a successful career as a venture capitalist, author, and podcast host. With years of experience analyzing emerging markets and disruptive technologies, Moss quickly recognized Bitcoin's massive potential to disrupt traditional systems and completely transform global finance as we know it. In his recent interview, Moss explains how Bitcoin is competing with store of value assets like bonds, real estate, and stocks. He predicts that Bitcoin could capture 5% of these markets, pushing its price to $2 to $3 million per coin within the next decade. As more investors flock to Bitcoin, this bold forecast is rapidly becoming a very real possibility. Make sure to stick around until the end of the video, as Mark Moss reveals his bullish predictions for Bitcoin's future and explains why this could change everything for investors. Also guys, only a small percentage of my viewers are actually subscribed. If you enjoy staying up to date with finance content, consider subscribing or liking the video. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Now, here's Mark Moss with his latest Bitcoin outlook.
Maybe the easiest way to understand this is I've been a venture capital investor for over a decade. And so the way that we think about this from a venture capital investor, because as a VC investor, you're trying to invest in a brand new technology that's not really there today, right? Trying to catch it very early. What markets am I disrupting? What's the total valuation of those markets? And what percentage do I think is realistic to capture from those markets? So Bitcoin, we could look at sort of the same way. So what markets is Bitcoin disrupting? Well, Bitcoin is not disrupting tech or payment networks. It's not disrupting Visa or PayPal. It's disrupting store of value assets, value itself. That's where it's competing. So then we'd go, okay, well, what's the addressable market, the TAM, total addressable market, for financial assets or store of value assets? And so store of value assets would be assets that you buy just to store your wealth. So the bond market, the real estate market, equities, right? Stocks, cash, offshore bank accounts, right? Those types of assets. Now, some of them are what we would consider utility. So I own a house that I live in, but then I also own real estate that I invest into. So then we have utility assets, and then some stocks are utility, but then a lot of it is just store value. So if we add that up, we have about $900 trillion. So then the question is, well, what percentage do we think is realistic to capture from those markets, and over what period of time? That's how we'd come up with the future valuation. So what we can see is that Bitcoin, I don't know what it is today, about $1.5 trillion. Gold's at about, I don't know, $14 trillion. So it's about a 10x just from there. So how much do we think we can capture from gold? A lot of people say we could capture the whole gold market or surpass it. How much from real estate? How much from bonds, et cetera? And so if we'd say, well, we think it's realistic to capture 5% of those store value assets, that would push the price of Bitcoin up to 45 trillion. Divided by the 21 million Bitcoin that there are, brings it to about a $2 or $3 million per Bitcoin price. Now, yeah. Mark, that math checks out, Mark, but do we think it's realistic to capture 5%, and over what period of time? Well, let's just take a look. So going back to my example of Uber was able to capture 5% of the taxi market in less than a decade. Airbnb was able to capture 5% of the hotel industry in less than a decade. We saw just last week a pension fund in Europe, I think it was called Cambridge, allocated now 3% of their fund to Bitcoin. Yeah. So 5% allocation doesn't seem that far off. It's realistic. It's happened many times in the past. It's happened with Uber and Airbnb. We're already seeing funds doing this. Paul Tudor Jones, billionaire, he's saying 5%. So we're already seeing that 5% number floating. We're already seeing people move to it, and I think 5% is very realistic. Maybe within the next decade for sure, and that puts it at a price of $2 to $3 million per Bitcoin.
Many experts now believe Bitcoin is on its way to global adoption. With Donald Trump's election victory and his crypto-friendly stance, investors are speculating that this could speed up digital asset adoption in North America, as well as in Latin America, where Bitcoin and stablecoins already act as vital inflation shields and remittance tools. In countries like Argentina and Venezuela, where inflation and currency instability are high, Bitcoin trading has surged. Experts predict that Trump's promised policies, such as a national Bitcoin reserve and fewer regulatory hurdles, could further boost the region's growing crypto activity, which already processes over $85 billion in transactions each year. With clearer U.S. regulations likely to follow Trump's victory, market sentiment is high, and institutional interest in Latin American crypto markets is increasing. Now let's return to Mark Moss as he discusses the massive global change Bitcoin could bring.
I think we could be sitting at the precipice of a massive change globally. In my opinion, and based off of historical cycles, it looks like the world and human nature always takes things too far and then overcorrects too far and then goes too far. And so we went way too far towards this centralization, the dollar, the U.S. world-led order, the dollar homogeny, the UN, the WEF, all of these things. And I think the world is sick of that and it's pushing back against that. And so we can see this globally with China and Russia and the BRICS breaking out. But we can see it in the United States as well. What this election was in the United States wasn't about Trump or Kamala. It was really we the people versus the deep state establishment. And most Americans knew that. It wasn't a personality contest or a beauty contest. It was about the people, independent, decentralized, private citizens against a global order. I believe that Bitcoin solved one of the oldest problems of humanity. And if you want to make money in the world, you have to solve problems. And the bigger problems you solve for the more people, the more money you make. You figure out personal computers and bring them to all the people in the world, like Bill Gates, you become one of the richest people in the world. And so one of the oldest problems in humanity is, how do I store my property in a way that it can't be stolen? So the original cavemen, like, you're going to come kill me and take my chickens. So then we band together, and then it's this village against this village, and it's this kingdom against this kingdom, and now it's this government against this government. And Bitcoin answered that. And it allows me to now hold my property in a way that cannot be diluted or seized or censored. And so I believe everybody should take advantage of that. That's a pretty big deal, and we should definitely do that. So one, I highly recommend it, but I do understand that there's differences for different people for different situations. The other thing I would say is that Bob Burnett from Barefoot Mining, he's one of my partners in a mining operation that we're in. He's brought to our attention publicly that Satoshi actually created two digital scarcities at once. So the first digital scarcity was only 21 million. The second digital scarcity is the block size. So we can only get so many transactions per block. And there's only a block every 10 minutes. And I forget the exact math, so fact check me on this, but I think it's about 400,000 transactions a day. So how does that work when 8 billion people are using it? The answer is it doesn't. And now, using AI and combining UTXO inputs and outputs, maybe we double, triple, quadruple that number. Maybe we get to 1 million or whatever, but it's still not going to handle everybody. So the reality is, if we think down into the future, the majority of people probably won't self-custody their Bitcoin or transact on the main chain. It'll just be, unfortunately, physically impossible to do that. So I think you have to understand all those things, but to sort of put a pin back into this, yes, it solved the oldest problem in the world. I can custody on my own. I should certainly do that if I'm able to, if I feel competent enough to do that without putting myself at risk. I think about generational wealth, and Bitcoin really kind of makes you think even more about that, because you have this generational asset, an asset that could sit there and save its value for 1,000 years, right? And then I have kids, and my kids are getting older, so I'm starting to think about that. I'm getting older, so I'm thinking about that. The entire financial system and education system is built on this philosophy of dying with zero. There's a best-selling book titled Die with Zero. And so basically the goal is to get a good job, save for retirement. So that means I'm going to save a bunch of money to that. Then I can stop working. I can live off the savings, and hopefully my savings doesn't run out before I die, which I think is a horrible idea. Like, why wouldn't I push the value into the future instead of stealing value from the future with debt? And so when I think about that, the argument to that is, why would I want to give my kids any money? It's going to make them lazy. It's going to make them entitled. It's going to ruin my kids. And I agree. Like, you give things to people, they do become lazy and entitled. But again, there's nuance. And so, yes, that could happen, but I could also teach my kids properly and train them other ways so that doesn't happen, for example. But basically, the idea of the family constitution is by setting up a system where I can pass my wealth on down to future generations, maybe my kids, but could be my great, great, great grandkids. But the constitution sets a set of rules or laws around the way that money works. So, for example, the Constitution of the United States. It restricts what the government can do with that. So my Constitution, for example, for my family, is a set of these. So it's one, what are things I believe? What are things I believe about the world? So I believe that we should provide value to the world. I believe that we should be building our skills and we should be trying to solve problems for others. I believe we should be giving to the world more than we're taking. I believe we should be helping others with our money. I believe that trusting mainstream advice is almost never wrong. I believe that we should take personal responsibility. We should learn to manage our time. Like, these are things I believe. And so I write all of that into my constitution. And then I want to pass those ideals down to my future generations, but I also want to put a set of rules. So then, for example, my kids, grandkids, etc., future generations, they're not able to just like take the money and do nothing. They can't just sit on the couch and do nothing and get money. But for example, if they want to start a business, the trust could evaluate their business idea. And if it seems like they've thought through it pretty well, then we'll give you the money for the business. You want money to buy a house? If you're able to qualify for the house, you make enough money, you can qualify, then we can give you the money to help you with the house. So then the trust could be used as a way to help them without giving them a handout that holds them back or harms them, right? And so that's what I want. I want to give my kids that leg up. I want to let my kids build on top of what I've already built. So I think about my life as like a block of time. My life and the things that I've accomplished and built is the proof of work of my life. And my life, hopefully 100 years, is one block. And I want my kids to add the next block and each generation to keep adding that block, but only in a way that they can add value to those blocks and not take back. So that's what the Constitution is. It's a well thought out plan that pushes your thoughts, your ideologies, your truths forward, and then puts strict requirements on what people can and cannot do with the money or had to have access to the money. So then it somewhat preserves it moving forward. It can pay for education, it can pay for courses, and things like that.
With all of that said, Mark Moss believes that we're on the brink of a massive global shift, driven by the potential of Bitcoin and the changes unfolding in the US. The rise of Bitcoin, coupled with more freedom of speech, could set the stage for a renewed era of economic growth and global influence. As we look to the future, Moss reminds us that while the US may once again serve as the world's influencer, the real key to change will be in education, freedom of expression, and the embracing of technological advancements like Bitcoin. With Bitcoin offering solutions to humanity's oldest problems, it's clear that the revolution has just begun. Moss remains optimistic and hopeful for a brighter future where Bitcoin could change and transform the world for the better. Anyway, guys, before we go, if you want to stay most up to date on the crypto and Bitcoin world, make sure to subscribe to my daily 5-minute crypto newsletter. It's a concise resource for the latest expert predictions, breaking news, and top on-chain analysis, trusted by over 50,000 subscribers for insightful crypto investment information. Don't miss out on the opportunity to stay informed in the crypto market. The link is in the description below. I hope you all enjoyed today's video and that it provided you with some value. I'll see you all in the next one, and as always, all the best.